The clinking of silverware on porcelain echoed across the long oak table. My parents sat at the head, their expressions carved from stone. Every cousin, aunt, and uncle had their eyes fixed on me. I could still feel the weight of their stares like 1,000 knives. My father's voice cut through the tense air. "Quit your job," he said, slow and deliberate, "or leave this family." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. My mother folded her arms, a faint smile tugging at her lips as if she'd finally won. Around me, whispers started, pity, shock, and judgment, blending into a low hum. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My job wasn't just work. It was the only thing that gave me independence, the only thing that was mine. And now they were asking me to choose between survival and belonging. They thought they had me cornered, that I would crumble under the pressure. But what they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment all along. To be continued. Before that night, before the ultimatum that shattered everything, my life looked ordinary from the outside. I had a modest apartment on the edge of town, a steady job at the publishing house, and a quiet routine that gave me peace. Every morning I'd wake up to the smell of coffee drifting through the hallway of my building, the sound of my neighbor's dog scratching at the door, and the rustle of newspapers sliding under doors. I liked my work. Editing manuscripts wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. I had a knack for spotting patterns, catching inconsistencies that others overlooked. That talent earned me respect at the office, though my family dismissed it as playing with papers. In their eyes, success meant one thing: following the family business. My father owned a chain of hardware stores, passed down from his father, and my brother was already being groomed to take over. Me, I was the soft one, the dreamer, the one who didn't belong in the family mold. At Sunday dinners, it showed. My brother Daniel always got the spotlight. His new car, his latest business idea, his plans for expansion. My parents would beam with pride, hanging on his every word. When it was my turn to speak, the air shifted. My father's brow would furrow, my mother's lips would tighten, and Daniel's smug grin would widen just enough for me to notice. They tolerated me, but they never celebrated me. One memory sticks like a thorn. It was last Thanksgiving. The table was heavy with roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, and the sweet, sharp smell of cranberry sauce. Everyone went around sharing what they were thankful for. When it reached Daniel, he leaned back, adjusting his gold watch so the light caught it just right. "I'm thankful Dad trusts me with the future of the business," he said, his voice dripping with pride. The room erupted with applause. Even my mother dabbed her eyes as if he'd recited poetry. Then it was my turn. I cleared my throat. "I'm thankful for my team at work," I said. "We just helped a new author land her first book deal." She cried when she signed the contract. Silence. Utensils clinked awkwardly. Finally, my father coughed. "Maybe one day you'll do something that matters," he said. The words hit me harder than I let on. That night, alone in my apartment, I stared at the photo album my grandmother had given me years ago. It was filled with childhood pictures, me at piano recitals, Daniel with his trophies, family vacations. Grandma always told me, "Proof of who you are is in the little things, not the big ones." That album became my anchor. Still, I tried to keep the peace. I showed up to dinners, I smiled when I was ignored, and I swallowed my pride when my achievements were belittled. But each small cut added up, carving away pieces of me, until the family dinner where it all came crashing down. That night wasn't about Daniel's success or my softness. It was about control. My parents believed the family name meant loyalty at all costs, and loyalty, in their definition, meant obedience. My job, my independence, my sense of self, they saw it all as rebellion. So they drew the line in front of everyone. "Quit your job or leave this family." My heart pounded as I looked around the table. Some relatives avoided my eyes, shifting uncomfortably. A few, Daniel included, looked thrilled, as though they'd been waiting for this moment. My mother's smug expression told me she thought she'd finally cornered me. But deep down, I felt something shift, something they couldn't see, because while they thought I was fragile, they had no idea how much strength I had been quietly building. That night was the first time I realized I would no longer play by their rules. To be continued. The days after that dinner felt like walking through fog, heavy, suffocating, and endless. My phone buzzed nonstop, missed calls from my mother, terse texts from my father, and smug little messages from Daniel. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Family comes first. You should know that don't ruin Thanksgiving again this year. At work, I buried myself in manuscripts. The smell of fresh ink and the rhythmic tapping of keyboards gave me small comfort. But even there, the tension followed me. I'd catch myself staring at my phone, heart racing each time it lit up. My parents had a way of turning silence into pressure. Every ignored call felt like defiance. Every reply felt like surrender. Then came the whispers. At a cousin's birthday party, I noticed the sideways glances, the hushed tones when I walked into the room. She's tearing the family apart, one aunt murmured, not realizing I was within earshot. Daniel smirked when our eyes met, enjoying the spectacle. The humiliation wasn't loud. It was subtle, precise, like a blade nicking at the same wound again and again. Nights became the hardest. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the occasional bark of a stray dog outside. Sleep never came easy. My chest felt tight. My thoughts spun like a wheel I couldn't stop. The question clawed at me. Was I selfish for holding on to my job? But every morning I returned to the photo album. I'd run my fingers over the worn leather cover, flipping through the pages. There I was, 6 years old, clutching a piano certificate. There was Daniel, 10, grinning with a soccer trophy. Grandma's handwriting in the margins reminded me, don't forget who you are. That book became more than a keepsake. It became my quiet rebellion. Still, the pressure grew. One night, my father showed up at my apartment. The sound of his fist pounding against the door echoed through the hallway. When I opened it, his face was red, his jaw tight. "You think you can ignore us?" he hissed. "This isn't just about you. It's about this family's reputation. People are talking. Dad, it's just a job," I said softly, trying to stay calm. "It doesn't hurt anyone." "It hurts us," he snapped. "Quit. Or you're done." He left before I could answer, the echo of his footsteps fading down the stairwell. That night I broke. I sat on the couch, knees pulled to my chest, tears streaming down my face. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unexpected number. "Hey, it's Maya. I know it's none of my business, but I heard what happened. You don't deserve this." Maya was my coworker, quiet but observant. She was the kind of person who noticed when you skipped lunch or looked tired. I hadn't told her anything, but word must have traveled. Her message felt like a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. I stared at the glowing screen, my heart pounding for a different reason now. And as I typed back, "Thank you. You have no idea how much that means." A small ember of strength sparked inside me. It wasn't much, but it was enough. That was the first time someone reminded me I wasn't alone. To be continued. By the time the following week rolled around, the pressure had escalated beyond anything I had imagined. My parents weren't just hinting anymore. They were leveraging every tool they had to bend me to their will. Phone calls were replaced with official letters, signed notices from the family's lawyer. My job, my independence, my dignity, all seemed under attack. If you don't resign by Friday, we'll take legal steps to challenge your inheritance, one letter read. Inheritance? They were trying to weaponize the family trust to corner me, to prove that loyalty was non-negotiable. My chest tightened. The walls of my small apartment suddenly felt like the walls of a cage. At the same time, my father started making veiled threats at work. A cousin from the company, one of his allies, suddenly questioned my dedication in front of my boss, hinting that family drama might interfere with my career. Rumors began to spread. She's causing trouble. Better watch her. I felt the isolation deepen as colleagues whispered behind my back, unsure what to believe. I wasn't naive. I knew they believed they had me cornered. I could see the smug satisfaction in my mother's eyes every time we met. Daniel's grin was sharper than ever. It wasn't enough for them to win. They had to humiliate me completely. But that's when I realized something crucial. I wasn't defenseless. The photo album my grandmother had given me became more than a source of comfort. It became evidence. Inside were pictures, letters, and notes that documented patterns of favoritism, subtle abuses, and family promises they had broken. I had also saved copies of emails, financial statements, and old messages showing Daniel and my parents acting with complete disregard for fairness. I began organizing it all, building a case silently. Every photo, every note, every receipt was a small weapon. The realization was intoxicating. The very tools they thought they controlled, money, authority, tradition, could now be turned against them. The first time I revealed a piece of that strategy, it was subtle. At a family meeting designed to intimidate me, I calmly produced a folder. Inside were copies of agreements, documented evidence of favoritism, and clear proof of broken promises. My father froze. My mother's smirk faltered. Even Daniel's smug grin twitched. For a brief moment, the room felt heavy with disbelief, but instead of backing down, they doubled down. You think this changes anything? My father spat. You still belong to us, and we will make sure you regret defying the family. I met his glare calmly, voice steady, controlled. They thought they still had control. I reflected silently. They didn't. That night, alone, I spread the documents across my apartment table, the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminating each page. The smell of ink and paper filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of brewing coffee I had left untouched. I realized something vital. I wasn't just resisting anymore. I was preparing to fight, strategically, purposefully. The midpoint twist wasn't just about survival. It was the moment I knew I could reclaim my life, my dignity, and my future. And the best part? They had no idea. To be continued. The war began quietly. At first, it was whispers in hallways and side glances at work. Then came the letters, the calls, the subtle manipulations that made it clear my family wasn't going to stop until I bent. Daniel sent messages to my colleagues, painting me as unreliable. My parents subtly recruited neighbors and distant relatives to take their side. Did you hear what she's doing now? One neighbor asked another at a weekend gathering. I don't know how she thinks she can keep going like this. I heard it all, felt it all. And yet, I didn't crumble. Instead, I started documenting everything. Each rumor, every phone call, every veiled threat. I organized emails, texts, and old family records. Even the photo album from Grandma became a strategic asset, its pages documenting promises broken, favoritism shown, and manipulations executed. That album wasn't just sentimental anymore. It was proof, a weapon disguised as memory. Maya, my ally from work, became my silent partner. Together, we devised plans to counter their attacks. She reminded me to breathe when nights grew long and heavy, when the pounding of my heart matched the pounding of the fear in my chest. She reminded me that I wasn't alone, that someone else could see the truth. I started noticing cracks in their carefully constructed facade. Daniel's confident smirk would falter when he thought I wasn't looking. My father grew restless during conversations, checking his watch more than once, tapping a pen nervously against the table. Even my mother's cool smile sometimes twitched at the corners. The symbolic objects I had once treated with fondness, the album, old letters, even my small piggy bank of savings, took on new weight. Every piece of evidence was a brick in the wall I was building between myself and their control. It was my fortress, and it was growing stronger. Rumors spread, but so did my resolve. I became strategic in every interaction, documenting everything, questioning inconsistencies, and preparing for the inevitable showdown. The tension became a tool, a sharpening stone for my patience and intelligence. Then came the day that made it clear the reckoning was near. Daniel had tried to manipulate a family meeting to humiliate me, but I arrived with proof that not only countered his lies, but also exposed the favoritism and deceit that had been ongoing for years. Faces turned. Whispers died. The smug confidence in their eyes wavered. I felt the shift, subtle but undeniable. The scales were tipping, and I was ready to act. I looked around my apartment that night, the album open, evidence laid out, and my phone buzzing with supportive messages from allies. The room smelled faintly of ink and coffee, heavy with tension and anticipation. I felt my heart beat calm, my mind clear. The day of reckoning was coming, and no one could stop it. I was no longer the soft, overlooked child. I had become a strategist, a warrior quietly building strength while my opponents underestimated me. Every insult, every manipulation, every attempt to corner me had fueled this transformation. The war was no longer about obedience. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future. And I was ready. To be continued. The family gathered again, this time under the guise of a reconciliation dinner. The long oak table gleamed under the chandelier, silverware perfectly aligned, as if nothing had ever happened. The air, however, was electric with tension, like the calm before a storm. My parents smiled, but their eyes betrayed unease. Daniel's grin was tight, forced. He thought he had prepared me for humiliation once more. He had no idea that the pieces were now in my hands. I entered the room calmly, holding the photo album, a thick folder of documentation, and my piggy bank, the symbolic proof of my independence and careful planning. The smell of aged paper and ink filled the air as I placed the evidence deliberately in front of everyone. "Let's begin," I said, my voice even, controlled, steady. I opened the album. Page by page, I laid out the truth. Broken promises, favoritism, and the manipulation that had defined the past years. I presented emails, financial records, and legal documents. Every whisper, every rumor, every attempt to corner me now became a mirror reflecting their deceit. The room went silent. The clinking of cutlery and faint ticking of the wall clock were the only sounds. My father's hands trembled slightly. My mother's smile faltered. Daniel's face turned red, his confidence unraveling like thread. "You thought you could break me," I said, looking directly at my parents. "You thought my independence was a weakness, but all you did was prepare me to show you the truth." I paused, letting my words settle like a weight across the table. "I don't want apologies," I continued. "I want change." The album wasn't just a record. It was a revelation. The folder wasn't just evidence. It was undeniable proof. The piggy bank, once small and insignificant, symbolized the financial and emotional autonomy I had carved out for myself, despite their attempts to control me. For the first time, they realized the extent of their miscalculation. Their empire of control had cracks too deep to repair overnight. Their influence, their threats, their whispers, they had all failed. Daniel opened his mouth to argue, but the evidence spoke louder than any protest. My parents leaned back, defeated, forced to confront the consequences of their actions. Even the relatives who had quietly taken sides could no longer deny what was in front of them. I closed the album and looked around the room. "This is not about punishment," I said softly, but with firm resolve. "It's about accountability. About learning that control does not equal love." The room was silent, heavy with realization. Their power had crumbled, replaced by a new order, one I had quietly built in the shadows while they thought I was fragile. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. This was the moment where humiliation was replaced by empowerment, doubt replaced by certainty, and fear replaced by resolve. And as I walked out of that room, leaving the album and folder on the table, I knew one thing. I was no longer their pawn. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, my future, to be continued. The days after the confrontation felt surreal. The tension that had gripped me for weeks began to loosen, replaced by a quiet, steady sense of control. My parents retreated into themselves, their authority diminished, their smug confidence replaced by reflection, or perhaps denial. Daniel avoided my gaze, no longer daring to flaunt superiority. The relatives who had once whispered now approached me cautiously, respect tinged with lingering guilt. I moved forward deliberately. My apartment, once a small refuge from their scrutiny, became a headquarters for rebuilding my life. The photo album, once a record of memories and small hurts, now sat on my desk, pages carefully preserved but redefined as evidence of resilience rather than submission. My piggy bank, once modest and almost forgotten, had grown, not just in coins, but in significance. Each dollar inside represented the independence I had fought to claim, the quiet victories I had amassed in the shadows. At work, life returned to normal, but I felt transformed. My colleagues, once unsure, now treated me with renewed respect. I was no longer just the quiet, dependable editor. I had become a person who could navigate storms without losing composure. Maya, my ally, smiled knowingly, sharing a quiet nod whenever our eyes met. Together, we had turned whispers and threats into strategy and empowerment. I also took steps toward long-term healing. Therapy sessions helped me process the emotional toll, while small personal victories, like buying my own apartment outright and setting firm boundaries with my family, reinstated my sense of agency. The legal disputes, once looming like dark clouds, resolved in my favor. Fairness had finally been restored. Symbolic moments punctuated the journey. The album remained on my desk, open to a page where a childhood note read, "Proof of who you are is in the little things." The piggy bank now sat proudly on a shelf, overflowing, a reminder that small, consistent acts of courage can accumulate into undeniable strength. Even the family home, once a site of pressure and expectation, became a distant backdrop. No longer a place of control, but a memory of lessons learned. Emotionally, I felt closure. The humiliation that had once seemed permanent had been replaced by empowerment. I had navigated manipulation, favoritism, and threats, and emerged not just intact, but stronger, wiser, and more grounded. I realized that boundaries weren't betrayal. They were survival. Autonomy wasn't arrogance, it was necessity. Cinematically, the contrast was striking. The cramped, tense dinners, the hushed whispers, the sharp edges of fear and doubt, all of that had given way to calm, open spaces. My apartment was filled with sunlight, books, and laughter from friends I had chosen. People who nurtured rather than dictated. I felt the difference in every texture. The soft linen sheets I now slept on without fear, the crisp pages of a freshly printed manuscript, the gentle hum of life continuing outside my window. And though the battle was over, a sense of possibility lingered, a quiet promise of growth and opportunity. The journey hadn't ended. It had transformed into a new beginning. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Have you ever faced favoritism, betrayal, or someone trying to control your life? It's hard and it's lonely. But the truth is, You're never as powerless as you think. Every small act of courage, every bit of preparation, every ally you find can turn the tide. Share your story in the comments. Inspire someone who feels trapped. Celebrate the victories you've quietly won. Remember this: worth isn't something they give you, it's something you claim for yourself. And sometimes, the hardest choices, the ones that make others uncomfortable, are exactly the steps that lead you to freedom, dignity, and the life you deserve.